the Flawed Workshop podcast with me, your host, Nancy Art Music.
And me, your co-host, Alex Roberts.
Today, we're here with...
Tony Karnowski, and I currently write the web series Pound on Webtoons.
Woohoo! Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We're very excited to speak to you about all sorts of things.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We'll start with where we start with every episode. Primarily, you're a writer, but you also do music as well. So tell us a little bit about how both of those sort of journeys started and kind of how they led to where you are today.
Music has kind of always been there. I guess I'll start there. I didn't start playing until I was probably 13, but I don't ever remember not listening to music all the time. And while I was listening to music, I was always kind of writing stories in my head while I was listening. Like I was mad about, I'd play with G.I. Joes or Transformers or whatever when I was a kid, and I would have music playing in the background, and that was the soundtrack to whatever I was doing. But I mean, we're talking about stuff like Peter Gabriel and, Pink Floyd and, so it was some dark stuff at times, for a young child. But at any rate, and that just kind of naturally turned into me wanting to write stories. I've always read comics, and let me take a step back there. One of the things that I used to do, and this is going to seem maybe kind of out of left field, but when I was a kid, when I was sitting here playing with these action figures, one of the things I'd started doing was I had basically a journal, right? I called it my war journal because it started with G.I. Joe, right? I'm showing my age a little bit.
All the best stories do,
right? But I'm glad you appreciate. So, but what I would do is I would go and play and whatever, and then I would go and write down everything that happened, right? And then going back, I had notebooks full of this stuff, right? And I mean, it was horrible, right? But it's the stuff of a child, but it was basically fanfic before that had a name, right? And and it just kind of progressed from there. I kind of stopped with comics when I was I still read them, but I didn't really pursue it. Probably when I was around 14 or 15, just because I fell into playing drums. That became pretty much life for me. If it didn't involve music, I didn't really care. And that lasted probably about 12 years. I was in my late 20s. And then, well, actually, let me take a step back on that. My mid-20s, I decided I wanted to start writing comics again. I was working a corporate job, was miserable, hated it. And at the time, everything I could find that said, hey, this is how you do this was basically, well, if you don't know somebody in comics, you're probably not going to get into comics. Yep. So write something else, meet people, and then see if you can then kind of go from there. And I was playing in a really terrible Dungeons and Dragons group at the time. And it was terrible because there were 16 players, which is just too many. God,
that's a huge
it was
group.
Miserable. The DM was a wonderful person, but he couldn't say no to people. And so it was just like, man. And then there was always that one player that wants to spend 4 hours arguing the rules, right? And so it was a lot of drinking.
We started. No, I don't argue about. Well, I mean, actually, I did when we started playing. We started playing Dungeons and Dragons for the first time last year in February.
It was just before the pandemic, yeah.
Yeah, so
that's a good time to start, though, right? So
yeah.
Oh, we nailed the timing, yeah.
We had nothing else to do, so it was perfect. And you were DMing for the first time, right in the deep end. The first time you ever played.
Having never played, decided to DM. I thought, baptism of fire. If I can do this, I can do anything.
But we had 6 players at one point, and that was quite a lot. So 16, I can't even imagine.
It was too much. I mean, it eventually got broken up into where we basically had 2 groups, right? So it's like our session would meet every other week, and there would be like 8 of us at a time. And that was kind of, again, it just got way too big.
So I've got this image now that you've got maybe, there's like 5 bards or something. And then if there's like one paladin and they can just sort of be the minstrels for this paladin, just...
I mean, it was very Monty Python in a lot of ways, right? And it kind of felt ridiculous like that. But I don't know. I remember I was playing a rogue because I just always play a rogue. And it was also one of those parties where every time I would try to get up to rogue shenanigans, like, hey, there's stuff here to steal. I'm going to steal this.
Yeah.
The entire party would turn against me, and it was just miserable. It was no fun.
That's not
the
fun.
was trying to turn me. This was back, mid-aughts, right? So it was, during the Lord of the Rings when the movies were out, and so they were really big. And for some reason, my DM really wanted me to play Legolas. And so he was basically slowly turning my character into Legolas. Like every chance that he got, like he changed my alignment. Like it was just, once that happened, I was like, I'm done. You know, like this is, love you guys. We'll go drink beer. We'll have fun. It's good. But I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go write some books. Mm-hmm. So I went and started writing some stories, wrote 3 novels, and then decided, hey, I actually really enjoy, this is another story from another time. I don't love writing prose. We can talk about that in a minute if you want, but I really like telling stories, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? I've tried for a music degree a couple of times. It didn't pan out either time. Let's try English out, see how that works. And went back to school, got a creative writing degree, completely learned that everything that I was doing up until that point was completely wrong. Even though it was, according
to the man,
exactly. According to the man, it was incorrect, but I still learned a lot, met a lot of great people, and then kind of fell out of that. Yeah, graduated, and about the time I graduated, then I fell into another corporate job that kind of started eating up all my time because that's what they are designed to do, right? But again, while in the midst of despair of, I hate my job, this is awful, I found myself on Reddit and was like, you know what, I've got to write. I need to be doing something to write, but I want to write comics. And by God, this is the 21st century. I can make this shit happen. Pardon the language. But so I got on Reddit, found myself on the Comic Book Collabs subreddit, which if you guys don't know it, it's a great place to go. A lot of supportive people on there.
Ooh, okay.
And just posted it's like, hey, if anybody needs any help editing, it's like I can help proofread, whatever, help with story, whatever. I've got a degree. Let me know what you want. I'll just help out. Worked on a couple of little projects like that. And then Orlando Casito, who is the artist for Pound, actually reached out to me and was like, hey, man, I'm working on it was a submission for a contest. He's like, wouldn't mind if you could look this over and make sure that, dot my I's, cross my T's, so on. Went through like almost, I'm not going to say I completely rewrote the dialogue because it was still the spirit of what was there was still there. Mm-hmm. But I helped tune him, help him tune it up. He was like, dude, this is awesome. Thank you so much. We ran with that. He submitted. He didn't win, but it didn't, he didn't expect to. I guess that's how the things go. But during that process, he was working on Pound, which was a series that he had created with Luke Lancaster, a guy that he had worked on a series before that called The Bad Guys. Long story on that, but it's great series if you're looking for something to read on Webtoons. And then towards the end of the first season, Luke got busy doing other things. So because of this relationship that we had worked on, we worked on this project, he came and was like, hey man, would you be interested in writing Pound? And I said, well, hell yeah. That sounds awesome. Right?
Sign me up.
And, sign me up, because it was like, I remember the moment too. I was like, oh dude, I just got offered a gig writing a comic. That's awesome. It's like victory. Right. Mm-hmm. And, it was great. It was a great feeling. And the comic was a lot of fun. It was weird coming in at the end of the first season because, obviously it was not a world that I had any say in. Everything, all the rules were kind of established. But that in and of itself was neat because whenever I had written something before, I had maybe too much control, right? Mm-hmm. I could, whatever I said went, and which is great, but it sometimes it's nice to have those constraints because it kind of forces you to be a little bit more creative. At least it does for me anyway. So, but when I got into that series, that was a lot of fun because it was basically, he said that they were kind of approaching it from a Dragon Ball Z kind of, that was what they were channeling. And I really hate to admit this, but I somehow missed Dragon Ball Z. Like I was just like a little too old before it came out.
I missed it too. I don't know whether it was the same for you, Alex.
It was shown religiously on Cartoon Network, and I was the right age for it. But it was all the English dub stuff.
Oh yeah.
But I had a friend, Josh. So if you're listening to this, then. Shout out to you for your Dragon Ball Z and just constantly running around the playground just shouting Kamehameha at each other. And,
that's awesome, man.
Oh yeah, but it was quite interesting. I didn't get a chance to catch all the way up because there's so many.
It's pretty hefty. Yeah, we're about. I think we just posted episode 18 of season 3. and there's 30 episodes per season. So there's what is that, 76 episodes roughly so far that we've got.
But yeah, I started reading some of it, and it's so interesting because I was like, oh, okay, cool. It's like, it's about fighting. Cool. And then like the more and more you read, it's like, whoa, there's extra stuff. What? There's powers involved. Oh my God. And it's like, I'm super excited to continue reading it. But I as I was kind of scrolling through, I thought that you'd been writing on it the entire time, but I found the sort of podcast that you guys did about Pound for a little bit. So that was really cool.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We did that during the first half of season 2. And like we meant to, like, we stopped right before Christmas in 2019. And then we meant to get back to it. Things kind of got busy, and then the pandemic hit. And then it was just like, yeah, you know what? We probably should do this right now, but we're good. You know, we just kind of let it go by the wayside. But that was a lot.
I missed the before time.
It was, we're slowly starting to get kind of back to things. I mean, I wouldn't say that things are normal by any stretch, but it's more normal than it was this time last year, right? I don't feel quite as freaked out going out into public now that I'm vaccinated. Yeah. I have 2 kids that are both under the age of 12, so I'm still a little weird about that, just because once they get the jab, I'll be okay, right? But up until then, we're still keeping our distance, but it's I do miss the before times.
Yeah. It was much easier to just pick up and go to a restaurant or a bar without having to check for reservations and what else.
The small heart attack when you pat down your pockets and think, oh God, my mask.
Yeah, that was weird. I actually walked into, so I live in Tennessee, and our backwards government has completely just done away with masks altogether now, which I feel like is a little too soon personally, but whatever.
Oh yeah, a good friend of mine is from Nashville. She's fantastic. Nashville, I think it's a bit like Austin in Texas. It's like this one safe haven of normality.
It's mostly just East Nashville.
Oh, okay.
Right? So it's not even the whole city. It's just East Nashville.
Well,
like Austin.
I didn't get that far. We got scared out when people started taking offense to our accents when we tried to get some meals.
It's crazy, man. So like, as a musician, all right, so in my mid-20s, I started playing in bands, and that was what I did for a living, for almost 10 years. And one of the bands that I played in, I wasn't a full-time member, but I was one of the subs. It was Same As It Ever Was, and it was a Talking Head tribute, right? Well, our lead singer had blue hair, because that's what lead singers do, right? They just do things like that. I mean, whatever. But anytime we were on the road, and I mean, we would go kind of all over the Southeast, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina. We kind of hit them all. It would dumbfound these people. It's like they had never heard of hair dye before. I mean, it's like, Lord, your hair's blue? I mean, it was just like,
I hadn't looked in the mirror recently, actually. What? Oh my God.
No idea. What? Oh my God. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, like, sorry, I'm going to tell like another real quick tangent. I remember girl that I was dating in high school. I remember the first time I met her mom, she asked me, where do you go to church? And my answer was, well, I don't really believe in organized religion. And like, that was the last time I ever dated. Like, and she, to the girl's credit, she was like, listen, I'm sorry, this is really messed up and I'm sorry, but like, I have been forbidden from ever talking to you ever again, because you basically might as well have just come in with horns and a tail and said that you were, Lord Satan, our master.
Oh man!
What I'm hearing is you let your Juliet go. Like this could have been a Romeo and Juliet sort of like amazing thing.
No, it wouldn't have worked. But I mean, it was cool. But I mean, it's just little stupid shit like that throughout my life where I felt like, even in my own family, it's like I don't feel like I can speak out all the time. Now I've gotten to a point in the last few years where, I don't really care anymore. It's like, I'm sorry, I love you guys, and at this point, I'm an asshole, and if you're not okay with it, then we're just gonna have to just agree to disagree at this point. But a lot of what I create, I think, comes from that, and it's like it's. I don't consider myself necessarily to be a writer that is, like I don't personally, and maybe this makes me a bad writer, I don't know, but when I sit down to write something, I'm not necessarily coming at it from what is the grand theme that I'm trying to get across.
I completely understand that, yeah, as a writer myself, yeah.
And it's, and I think maybe it's because I'm under the impression that we are, at least I was anyway, again, I can't speak for everybody, but I feel like I was most myself when I was like 12 or 13 years old, right? Like before society really kind of started having an influence and saying, oh, before I really started caring what people thought. Not that I mean, we all care what people think, right? But especially during teenage years, right? But because of that, the stuff that I loved when I was 12, 13, it was stuff like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and, music and, I mean, like Nirvana, stuff like that, and it was just, I feel like since then in my adult life, I've been chasing that feeling to a certain degree. It's like I'm trying to be true to my inner 12-year-old, if that makes sense. And 100%. It's like, not in a, I mean, like I've had people say that to me before, like, oh, you're acting like a 12-year-old, like you're being immature, right, or whatever. And I mean, I think that it could be a bad thing, but I mean, I think if you're being true to yourself and it's saying, these were the things that brought me happiness and, like completely unadulteratedly just made me happy. Right? Yeah. And I keep trying to do that. And when I try to write stories, I'm basically trying to tap into that, right? I'm trying to tell myself stories that I would have done when I was 12, 13 years old.
I listened to another podcast called Creative Pep Talk, where this guy, Andy J. Pizza, is amazing, and he's super enthusiastic about also just helping creators. And one of the things that he says is that oftentimes creators will make the things that they wish they had when they were younger, or they were in basically that just didn't exist at some point. And I am increasingly finding that, especially with how easy distribution is online, you literally make something in seconds and it's out into the world. It's incredible, all the things that we didn't know were needed, because people are, like, for example, in visual art, people are seeing more characters that are people of color than LGBTQIA people who are getting some representation where there was absolutely none. And most of the people who create that work are people who are the same as the work that they're creating. So it's really incredible to see how much of yourself, even sometimes when you're not exactly aware of it, gets out onto the page or into the music or into the film. It's just fantastic. And interesting to see.
No, I agree completely. And I think you're right. I mean, because I'm, at least from personal experience, I know that is, I try to make music that I want to hear. It's not already out there, and it's like, well, why, because I mean, I know I've known people that have been in bands that, it's like, well, we sound just like Tool. Why? There's already a band called Tool and they're pretty cool, right? It's like, why are you are you going to one up Tool? I mean, it's like, it's one thing to
Tools.
Would probably be apt in those situations, right? Yeah. But no, they, but it's like, it's one thing to be inspired by or to be influenced by, but it's like you said, trying to fill the niche, trying to fill the void of things that weren't there before. And, I actually had this conversation with my dad the other day. Sorry, I feel like I talked a lot about it, but like he was talking about one of his things with, I don't like, because he was watching Grey's Anatomy. I've never watched this show, but he was watching it or whatever. And he got sucked into it and was going down to Grey's Anatomy Hall. I was like, there are like 17 seasons. And I was like, okay, great. That's awesome, Dad. But his one beef with it was that I just wish they weren't trying to change my mind. Like, what? He's like, well, there's just so much like social commentary, and there's so much, they're forcing the gay characters and they're forcing this and forcing that on me. I'm like, dude, that's capitalism. He's like, what? And it's like, if there's a character in a show that fills a demographic, it's because they feel that there's a demographic that needs to be represented by that. And if you don't like that, then your choices don't watch the show, right? I mean, if you don't like it, you should step back and ask yourself some questions as to why you don't like it, right? But barring that, right, you don't have to watch the show, but don't sit here and say that capitalism, because that's another conversation. Capitalism is a perfect system, and yet I don't like the social justice warriors forcing all this on me in my Grey's Anatomy, right? And it's like, you can't have it both ways, right? It's like either you're cool with capitalism and the change that it brings, right? Because at least in America, I mean, we are a changing population, I guess is the word I'm looking for, right? I mean, it's like there are fewer white people than there were 20 years ago. And thank God. I don't know how it is, but I mean, like, I'm sick of white people, man. I'm just, anyway, sorry. Moving on from that. But like, but to your point, though, I need to listen to that. What was the name of that podcast again?
Creative Pep Talk by Andy J. Pizza. He's wonderful. Yeah, highly recommend it. It's part of the reason he's a big inspiration behind this podcast. And because I listen to his podcast so much, I try not to mention as many of the things that he mentions in his, because otherwise I'm just essentially stealing his advice and giving it to other people.
No. You're paying homage.
Sorry?
Yeah, you're paying homage. And I mean, and if it's a springing off point too, because I'm definitely a believer in the idea that there's nothing new under the sun. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like everything has, any thought that you've ever had, any story idea that you've ever had, somebody else has had that idea, but it's how you pull it off.
Well,
right?
just finding the name for this podcast was an incredible task. It was, I think I got through no less than 20 different names that I typed into Google, and either somebody had a website under that name, or most of them, of course, were podcasts, because I was looking underneath podcasts to see what was there. But it was incredible. The downside is that saying the flawed workshop, just the word flawed, people mishear it all the time, which kind of sucks. Right. So I just resorted to sending people links all the time, and at least showing them a picture of it so that they can know what to look for when they found it.
Well, but I love that, because I mean, I feel like, it's the flaws that define us. Right?
Exactly. That's the whole point. It's until you notice your flaws, you won't progress. And quite often it's your flaws that make what is unique about your creation.
Exactly.
And I mean, the reason we started the podcast was because I, as a serial procrastinator and perfectionist, was finding that all the advice that is available, whilst, very enthusiastic and given to you by motivated people, every time you finish reading a book or watching a video about it, you leave with a sense of like, all right, finally gonna do it. Except the video that you just watched said, I wake up at 4:30 a.m. in the morning, I work out for an hour, I eat an avocado, and it's like, okay, but like, do you remember when you started what your day was like? Because the people who are giving these motivational tools to people are giving them from their perspective after they've already become successful and have been doing it for a long time. Whereas we want to kind of highlight that people who are like in the thick of it in some ways, or like successful and made it, are such relative terms. Like,
they should be defined by you, right? By what makes you feel like you're successful. And it's like, I said earlier, when I got offered to write on Pound, I mean, it's a very small potatoes comic. I'll be very honest, right? We have, as far as Webtoons goes, we don't have a huge viewership, right? We have a decent viewership, but compared to Webtoons, other titles, it's pretty small, right? But the fact that anybody else in the world was like, yeah, I think you're pretty good at this, and I'd like for you to write this series that I'm working on, that was huge for me, right? And it was like, and I really, honestly, if it had ended with Pound, I probably would have been like, okay, one of my dreams was to write a comic. And granted, it wasn't in the form that I expected it to, but in my experience, nothing in life has turned out the way I expected it to at all, right?
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that it's bad, or it's just how life is, right? But I achieved a goal, right? I was successful as far as that went in my mind. And I think that's something that like you're talking about these gurus or whatever, kind of forget sometimes. They always kind of get focused on, well, the goal is to be a millionaire or to, whatever, right? And it's yeah. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to derail.
That's right. I mean, this is kind of like one of the main things that we talk about, because the concept of what success is so different for so many different people. For me to actually be creating anything is such a huge step forward. This time last year, I was I had more time on my hands than usual, and I still felt guilty that I wasn't really doing anything with it, when my excuse the entire time was that I don't have enough time, I don't have enough equipment, I don't have the resources, despite the internet being on my fingertips the entire time, and just not taking advantage of it made me feel quite guilty. So now this year, I wouldn't say that I've made it, because I kind of want to start monetizing some of the things I'm doing. But like the fact that I'm doing it is such a huge step forward. I have like a cute little comic out every Saturday, and this podcast comes out every Thursday. That's incredible to me because I didn't have that. Like not even 6 months ago, I think.
No, you didn't.
And that's awesome. I mean, those are things that you absolutely should be proud of, right? Because you're doing the work, you're getting it out, you're putting it out there for people to see. And I mean, and that's a huge thing too, right? Like I remember, back in the days before the internet, right? Like we would talk about, well, it's like, okay, this dude's a fantastic drummer. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, cool. Who's he play with? Well, nobody. He just plays in his basement. Well, what good is that? I mean, it's like, and I mean, at the time, it was like I didn't understand what was good. I mean, but it's what made him happy, right? That's fine. But back then, it was like, okay, should you share that with the world? Shouldn't you get that out there and then put it in front of people? And now with TikTok and everything else, it's so easy to like you said, just create something and put it out there, hours later. And I was talking to some friends of mine. We had our first post-COVID party. Like everybody got vaccinated. We're like, yeah, we're going to go hang out. Still hung out outside. It was great. No, it was great. But I was talking to some of the guys that I play in a band with, and they're like, I haven't seen you in a year. What the hell's been going on? And it's like, well, I started doing TikTok and doing this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, I wish that this stuff had existed when I was in my late teens or early 20s, because if it had been there and I'd had that ability to get the stuff out there as easily as I do now, I don't know that I would have settled for a corporate job. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I would have been a little bit more comfortable starving for a little bit more, eating a few more packs of ramen for a few days as far as it was, Now I got kids, I got to feed the kids, and so it's a little bit different. But
well, no, you should feed the kids. You don't have to feed the kids.
That's fair. I mean, they really only need to eat once every 3 days, right? So I mean,
yeah.
This is why we're not parents, by the way.
I think that I really respect people that choose not to have kids. It was something my wife and I kind of went back and forth on for a long time. And I mean, for a substantial portion of my life, I was like, I just don't think I'm cut out for it, right? And it's like, partly it was because I always thought, next week I'm going to be a rock star and I'm going to be on tour, right? So, I mean, I can't have a family, right? That's not. And then when reality started to kind of realize, oh, wait, I'm still not a rock star yet. I guess I could have kids, and it's, I'm really glad that we made the choice that we did, because they have, and I mean, you'll hear people say this all the time, but it's like, they have made me realize what a piece of shit I am. It's wonderful, because I mean, it's like,
the honesty is refreshing. I love it.
And it's usually because they're giving you back to you on some level. It's like, my son, especially, he'll say something. I'm like, cheeky little, oh no, wait, I can't be mad at you about that. That was absolutely me. Right? I heard myself say that 2 weeks ago. Yeah, no, it's fine, man. I'll let it go this time. But I've always been a very quick to cuss. I like the expletives. They are some of my favorite words. They're just so colorful and useful in so many ways. Mm-hmm. And I still I'm trying to raise my kids the way my parents raised me. Now they were much better about not cussing in front of the kids. I mean, I just let fly. I'm sorry, judge me if you want, but I am what I am. But they in the South, you get judged for that.
On the topic of sort of bad words, cuss words and stuff. On my writing side of things, I frequently struggle to actually incorporate swear words into my stuff without then cringing at myself about it. I don't know if that's something that you've had when.
Oh, I guess sometimes.
You mean like in like dialogue? Or
yeah, either in dialogue or so I do a lot of poetry and stuff as well. So if I'm just a random expletive in there, and
very quickly, when I write lyrics, I find that sometimes it is cringy to swear in them, because I just kind of think back at like when I started writing music, I was like 13, 14, and I just remember wanting desperately to sound edgier by incorporating swear words, like, yeah. But no, it's oof. Anyway, go on.
But then when I go back to the editing stage, or sort of a couple of days later, on fresh eyes, looking at it again, and just go, it doesn't feel right. And I don't know if that's something that you've experienced with. There's a difference between saying it in the real life and then actually putting it into the physical world.
There's absolutely, for me anyway, like I am much better when I can edit what I say. When I speak, it's a lot of expletives, right? It's this, that, and the other. Just whatever reason. I don't know if it was like a defense mechanism growing up to try to get people. I don't know what the deal was, but I like them. And they're just, maybe it is. I think I may have just learned something about myself. It's because they are so frowned upon around here. I think maybe I started doing it just to be like, oh yeah, right. What are you going to say? What are you going to do now? Right?
It's one of the easiest forms of rebellion. You can what are you going to go back in time and stop me from saying it?
Well, right, like if you get told something's a bad word, it's like, ooh.
Immediately, it's much more interesting.
I mean, that's why is it bad?
I know you said that you try to keep this kind of sweary free, a little bit, and I've totally crossed the boundary here, and I apologize.
She can do what she wants with it.
I'm gonna just mark this episode.
Expletive.
Yeah, that's the one.
All right, cool. I'm good with that. Right?
Go for it. We don't have any sponsors yet either, so you're good.
All right, awesome.
Does that mean I can swear on this one as well?
Sure, if you like.
Oh, thank fuck.
Speaking of that word, it's the most versatile word in the entire English language. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it can be anything. Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, there was you've seen all I'm sure, like there was bumper stickers and stuff back in the 90s. It was like, fuck me, you fucking fuck. And it's like, I know what you mean.
It's a complete sentence. Yeah.
Exactly. With basically 2 words. Right. And I mean, and it's fantastic. And it's so incredibly useful. I think especially for verbal communication, because there are a very big difference between verbal communication and written communication. Mm-hmm. Now, part of what I do, my day job, if you will, is I'm a technical writer. Right. So obviously there is nary a fuck or shit in there at all. Right. Unless I slip it in somehow, and I'm kidding, of course, that they don't, it's all about knowing your audience. Right. Yeah. And I think that, like, I'm trying to think, we're talking about Tool, right? We talked about them, or I brought them up earlier, so, I mean, there were certain songs they had where they would cuss, right? But then others where they didn't. Right. And I think that it kind of depends on what you're going for. Right. Mm. Now, I would say that from like a dialogue standpoint, it would have to be it would have to fit the character, right? Mm. Like if you've got somebody that it just doesn't make sense for them to be a foul-mouthed sailor type, then it then maybe don't use it there. But I don't know, man. I like the expletives. I honestly, I don't use them a lot when I write, though. I mean, thinking back on it, I don't. Like I know that in this last season, I try to use them sometimes as like verbal tics, right? Because especially with with comics, one of the things that I found is that it's helpful from a writing standpoint if you can make the reader know who's talking without having to look at the bubble, right? So you find ways to this person always speaks with contractions. This person never speaks with contractions. This person, anytime something sideways happens, they say, damn it, or, whatever, something like that. Yeah. It's where it kind of becomes like a verbal tick for that person. And it's at least for me in comics, I find that's very helpful. Now, I try to do that somewhat in prose as well, though the thing with prose writing, like one of my creative writing classes that really sticks out to me was when we were talking about dialogue, and how, the common misconception is that you want dialogue to sound like very conversational. I want it to sound like conversation, which is really not true at all. Because and he proved it to us because he brought in a tape of a conversation that people had and played it, and it was the most boring shit you'd ever heard ever. Right? I mean, there's lots of weird pauses, and it was just very, in podcasting days, it's gotten a little bit different, right? And I think it kind of become a little bit more like radio in a way, right? But like just a straight up conversation between 2 people that don't think they're being recorded, it's usually not super entertaining, right?
Yeah.
And so what you're trying to do when you're writing dialogue in prose is I'm trying to remember how he said it. It was basically you're trying to give the impression of a conversation, and it's and again, in certain situations, I'm totally missing the point of your question, which was, do you use expletives? And I've gone this completely strange.
No, that's what I love about these sorts of things. Keep going.
This is great.
Well, and I mean, it's, because the idea there too is that whenever you want your characters to sound individuals, right? You want them to know who's speaking, because one of the things that I got really hammered into, was no attributions. No he said, she said, no attributions. You should be able to have a conversation in prose on the page, and people know who's speaking just based on what's being said. And I think that in that sense, expletives can be a very powerful tool, again, because if it's placed correctly. And I mean, it's really all about placement. It's about the tasteful use of it, I think, in all situations. And I think that's just language in general, right? I think that's what we're all trying to do when we're going over the same sentence 1,000 times and we move the subject. I mean, it's I'm sure we've all done that. If you guys write prose, right? You've rewritten sentences 10,000 times just to end up with the very first sentence that you wrote, right? And just it's,
yeah.
It's moments like this that make me very happy that I'm not a writer. But I must say that I love that just like earlier we mentioned D&D and playing that. I DM'd my first game I think last week, and it was
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was lots of fun, but it was I listened to so many like actual play D&D shows, and also a podcast called The Three Black Halflings, where they talk a lot about kind of how behavior at the table and how to DM well and how to voice characters, but all three of them are actors, so they've come from this like almost very professional way to play this game and elevate it in that way. But one of the things that they were saying is that as a DM, if you have a lot of non-playable characters, NPCs, they would be to, instead of doing like a different accent or a different voice for each one, the way they talk can tell you so much about their character. And, so it's not so much like speaking poshly and with a British accent, for example, but it's
Why was that aimed at me?
That's on you. I was not meaning it to be aimed at anyone. Okay. But you can tell like what a character is like if they use a lot of long words, and if they use just all of that makes such a big difference if you can, as a DM, memorize, like be in the character. And that informs how they speak and act in the situation. That makes everything else from that point easier. I don't write a lot, but I imagine that that's kind of the same with characters, both in prose and sort of on the comic as well.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're writing characters, I feel like writing the character prose versus comic is very similar, because it is kind of the same idea where you're just trying to put yourself into what would they be thinking, feeling in this situation, and then how would they react, right? And it's there was a Chekhov that said that character is action, right? And so basically what the actions, and I struggled with that concept forever. I'm like, what does that mean? Right? And eventually it kind of like, to me, and I mean maybe this is just my interpretation of it, but the way that I take that is that basically a character is not going to do an action that is out of character, right? It's whatever they do has to make sense to who they are and where they've come from, and you also use those to define that character. Now, I feel like again, writing in comics versus prose, it's very much the same. I DM'd for a while, and part of it, as that one horrible one was ending, I kind of had a moment there where I was DMing a little bit, and eventually that was what finally pushed me into I'm going to go ahead and actually start writing. Just because as a writer, it drove me batshit crazy when they went off script, right? It's like, and I mean, and eventually like I got to a point with DMing where it's like, okay, I have a very vague outline of what's going to happen, and I'm just going to wait for the right opportunity to bring in this thing, or that thing, right? But I just kind of let them lead me and then kind of go there. So it was almost like just improv, for a great portion of it. And I'm not saying I was a good DM. I think I was actually probably a pretty terrible DM, because I just, again, it's like I spent hours writing this story, and then it was just easy.
You will play my game.
My God, I remember like one time, I mean, I had spent 2 weeks working on something. I mean, I don't remember exactly how many hours I had, but we get down, start playing, and we were done after like 4 hours, and they were like, "This is unacceptable. We need to play for at least another 6 hours. This is not okay." And it's like, okay, well, I guess we can just wing it. It's like, I kind of have an idea of where we're going. Let's just go. And that was a weird kind of a thing too. Like, I don't know. I kind of got out of it. I mean, to me, 4 hours these days, that's plenty of time.
Plenty of time. Like, yeah. The sessions that we do currently are like maybe 3 at the most.
You guys have it so good. because that last party that I was in too, man, not only did we have 16 players, but we never, ever, ever, ever started playing before. We would meet before then, but we never actually started playing until after 11 o'clock at night.
Oh god!
And then it was like
What?
all night long, all night long.
I mean, that sounds really fun, but at the same time, I don't know
once
whether
in a while.
Woo! I
But-
couldn't do
was
it
cool
anymore.
Once in a while. Yeah, no, I'm too old now. When I say that, I'm not too. I could do it. I just don't want to.
Mhm.
Like I don't have any desire to do that. I reached a point where I like sleep. I know that
Yeah.
I am a happier person if I get this amount of sleep every night, and I'm going to aim to do that just because otherwise.
I would like to
my
just
life is-
quickly counter that point with the fact that you chose to have children, so clearly you don't enjoy sleep all that much.
Well, they're to the point. See, the thing is, they don't keep you up forever.
Oh,
right?
okay.
They do grow out of that phase. Right?
Yeah.
On my 18th birthday, my parents gave me a suitcase that was packed.
To be fair, you were going off to university.
Yeah, and they'd threatened it for many, many years, but that was my 18th birthday present from them. Was just
But I mean, it wasn't like here, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. Right?
Yeah.
no,
It
but
was-
my dad did then pretty much present me with a spreadsheet that he's been keeping of what I owe him as well. So
awesome.
Yeah.
It was so awesome.
yeah,
You
he,
start-
I at the time I was there thinking, why have you done this to me? In hindsight, now I'm there just going, I would have done the same.
Well, I mean, not knowing your dad, I can't speak for sure, but like, I could imagine doing something like that to my kids just for the sheer enjoyment of it. It's like, I'm not going to make you pay me this money, right? But I want you to know that I've been keeping tabs.
Yeah.
right? Because you've been an asshole to me every day of your life. And here's a receipt for how much I've spent.
I have got stats and numbers, and you cannot dispute. Here it is.
I mean, my one thing against that, other than that was probably traumatic for you, and I'm sorry that your dad did that to you, but that seems like an awful lot of work, man, and I'm just not that committed. I've got other things I want to do. I'm not that into revenge.
Yeah, I think your dad has he loves being funny, but with like a tactical purpose almost sometimes.
He's tactically funny.
Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna do this thing, and it's gonna be hilarious, but also I might mean it. You don't know.
It's all psychological with him constantly.
But it's always from a place of love in the end.
Yeah, it just took me 16 years to learn that.
Yeah, he could have been clearer, I think.
Yeah. But
That's part of the fun, though.
one of the questions I did want to ask you was, what was it like coming into a comic that had already been created and things? Because you mentioned at the start previously having all this control and creativity around your own projects, but then coming in and being requested to come into something to input your own personality and charisma onto it. What was that like? Were there any difficulties with that?
I don't know that I would say there were difficulties, but it was definitely weird, right? So like when they first Webtoon, like every series is a little bit different, right? And I mean, and it's also different whether you're on the canvas side or on the original side, which we're on the original side, which means that it's actually like funded by Webtoons or whatever. But we had 30 episodes per season, right? Now some have more than that. But when I came in, Luke had finished the first 26 episodes. And so they're like, basically, hey, we got 4 more episodes we need for this season. Why don't you write one and we'll see how it goes. Right. So I wrote one, and I think the idea originally was they were going to have like 2 or 3 people write a couple of different ones and then see which ones went best. And I don't know if I just knocked it out of the park or if Orlando just couldn't find anything else, or anybody else. But I wrote 4. No, actually, I take that back. I think I did 3 because I think he wrote up to the first 27 episodes of season 1, and I did 3 standalone that were like Legends of the WFL, what we called it, and it was basically like stuff that happened before the ongoing arc. But I kind of tried to write it in a way where it kind of sort of could fit in, if you would. It went well. They asked me to come back on for season 2, and then that one season was kind of interesting because Luke was still pretty involved at that point. He didn't have time to do the week-to-week scripts, but he basically sat down and wrote the entire season, season 2. This is everything that's going to happen. And that was a little bit interesting because, again, I'm still having to kind of make my ideas fit with what they're doing. And I had to, in a lot of situations, it was like, okay, well, I have to remind myself this is not my story. So what I want here really doesn't matter. Yeah, it'd be cool to work that in there, but I can let that go. And there were a lot of things like that. And it's funny. I don't know if you guys like how many stories you guys have written and like, but there are drafts, like entire drafts of issues and stuff that never saw the light of day, right? They completely axed, rewritten, but they still live very much in my mind. And it's like, and sometimes I forget that it didn't actually go that way. And it's like, oh shit, no, wait, scratch that detail, right? And and that was weirder in the second season because I was having to go back so much and look at what Luke had given me. Yeah. Now Orlando has always been super cool, and Ethan, Ethan LeBlanc, the editor with Webtoon, has always been super cool about run with it. If you've got this idea, try to let me be as creative as I could. And I can't speak for any other situation, but I know that with working with those two guys, they made it as absolutely easy on me as they could. Mm-hmm. But this might be a good place to say this. I am super excited about the next chapter that I've got coming up, which is I just found out about a month or so ago. I don't have a definitive date yet, but I have been greenlit by Webtoons for a new series called Sidonia Shattering. Woo! And it's a complete creation of my own. So I'm like super excited about getting that because I don't really have to answer to anybody on that, which is cool. Mm-hmm. Now that being said, I've already been I'm 6 or 7 episodes into it right now, like as far as the script go. The art. So I'm not an artist, right? I love art. I wish that I could draw. I have spent time in my youth. And I got decent, there were certain things that I can do, and I can draw better than some people, but I don't pretend that I couldn't pull off like a whole episode. Like I just don't think I have the stick to itiveness to make that happen. Not have it be anything that anybody wanted to see anyway. Right?
It takes so much extra time. The comic that I make is this tiny character that's literally is shaded in circle, and that still takes me longer than I think it does. So I couldn't even imagine making like a full blown thing where actual people with proportions are involved.
Right, and I mean it's like it amazes me. So with Unpound, we have like again it's different for every series, but we have a minimum of like 40 panels per episode. Right, mm-hmm. So each episode has to have at least 40 panels. And I think that it ends up being a little bit closer to the 50 mark, most episodes. But Orlando is cranking this out every week. I mean, he's writing, or he's not writing, but he is illustrating 50 panels every week. And I mean, in a lot of situations, he's doing the inks, or he's doing the line art, the inks, the colors. Mm-hmm. We've had a letterer the whole time who does some of the background colors. And we have a colorist that will work on some of the episodes, but I mean, for the most part, it's Orlando, and I mean, it's a lot of work.
That's incredible. That's oh really my god. Is. I mean, I only really found out quite recently that these are all like different jobs. Like we got Disney Plus. Woo! And started watching a documentary that they have on there called Marvel 616, and they show you the process, like how the art gets done. So first the sketches, then inking, then coloring, then lettering, and that's like a whole different thing. And they all have to collaborate. And that was completely mind blowing because, of course, again, I have been approaching my comic the same way that I did when I drew like doodles in my book when I was like 10 years old, where of course I do everything. I do the writing, lettering, coloring, sketching, everything. Actually, I didn't even sketch before. Now I started doing it and it's working very well. Nice. It's just so amazing that something like that can have, like, collaboration for me is like a touchy subject in some ways because I just never have learned to do it well. And I am, because the way that I create, I usually have an image of something in my mind. My perfectionism kicks in, and if it's not the way I see it in my head, I feel like it's failed and it's not gonna see the light of day. And just
So I used to say, I don't mean to interrupt you, but like that's ultimately what made me stop drawing. I say that I got good enough at it that I could piss myself off, which was to say I knew what it was supposed to look like, and it was
that's such a good way of putting it. Yeah.
You know, but it was just like I just, and it was like I know that if I had really buckled down and really put the effort into it basically, and you know, I can look back on it now and I can say that what happened was I reached the end of my natural ability, right? And then at that point, what I would have had to do was what everybody else does, which was work my ass off to get to the next point. And at that point, I was too busy chasing girls and playing drums and you know, that sort of thing. So it just kind of felt like that.
So you're quite literally hitting this and hitting that.
Exactly. Well, I was trying to hit something and hitting the other thing. But I'll let you decide which, right?
But it's quite interesting that, like, it's obviously, well, it seems obvious that it's a question of, like, what you're willing to simply spend the time on. I realized this with music, like for a while, I've been wanting to be a musician for so long, but I hadn't actually practiced or played any of the instruments that I wanted to be proficient in. And it was just a realization one day. It's like, oh my God, I can keep buying guitars, but unless I actually play one of them, I'm not really going to learn anything.
Right? Exactly. I mean, it's one of the things that I always thought, but I feel kind of lucky with music in some ways because I started playing. So, like I said, I've always listened to music and it was just always a part of my life. And I remember my uncle had a drum set that I would kind of occasionally be around. It was never something that I ever like really like spent any time with. But there was music in my family, I guess. And there was the gene was there or whatever. And I lucked out in that whenever I got into music, it was pre-internet. So I'm 43. So I'm, you know, a little older than some, but it was pre-internet. It was the height of grunge, like Nirvana. Like I got my drum set for Christmas when I was 13 and I got Nirvana's Nevermind the next day. And I learned to that and U2's Octane Baby. And I've learned to play drums for those two albums.
That is the 13-year-old life I wish I had.
It was pretty fucking awesome in a lot of ways, you know. I'm not gonna deny that, but it was weird because when I later in life, when I was a professional and I was a teacher, right? So I mean, because in my experience, I didn't know many professional musicians that weren't also music teachers, right? You kind of had to do it, and I mean, and it was one of those things too where a drum teacher friend of mine who. He and I used to talk about it. And he always fell into Star Wars quotes because that's just what kind of geeks we are. But he was, you know, it's like, you know, how did he put it? It was like, you know, I can't remember. But basically, it's like, you know, you can't really be a master at something until you teach it. Was what he would always kind of come back to. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting about the kids at that time, and this was during like Rock Band when it was huge, and you know, Guitar Hero and stuff like that was big. Good. It was so much fun, you know, it was great. But one of the things that I found about that was that a lot of the kids that were really stinking awesome at Rock Band would get behind a real drum set and didn't understand, well, I'm awesome and I can play Tom Sawyer by Rush on Rock Band. Why can't I do this behind a real drum set? Right?
Are you saying that red and yellow does not equal floor tom and hi-hat?
One of the things that I found that was interesting about that was that, you know, I don't remember ever having to be asked to go practice, right? Because like I would, you know, say, okay, you know, it's like the reason you were so good at that is because you were having a blast doing it. And Rock Band is a video game that is designed to have a kind of low bar for entry, right? You know, nothing against, I'm not saying that people that aren't really good at it didn't practice and get good at it, right? But it's just not the same thing, right? I mean, even playing an electronic drum set versus playing an acoustic drum set are very different experiences, right? I mean, there's obviously some similarities, but you know what I'm saying? But looking back on it, I don't remember ever anybody saying, you got to go practice. It was, I got home, homework, I don't have homework. I'm going to play drums, right? You know, and I would play drums until dinner, and then dinner would go by, and then I would go play drums, you know, and it's like, I just played and didn't realize. Like I was so busy having a good time, I didn't realize I was actually working and learning.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that when you grow older and you want to pursue these things or like have these things contribute to what like goes to your bank account eventually, that it becomes work, and like it like the fun diminishes in some ways. But when you were learning to do all that stuff, you were learning to do it because it was fun. And I think for me, I certainly forgot that about my music making. And so I'm rediscovering all that recently. And it's crazy, to think that that sort of shift in mindset changes your perception so much of something that you love to do. It's just a little sad sometimes.
It really is. And I find that if you want to absolutely ruin your love for something, go study at university. That is absolutely a way. I mean, I went to school for drum set at first, and again, I was coming at it from rock. I was a rock and roll drummer. That's what I wanted to play. But you can't study that at the University of Tennessee, right? But you can study jazz, right? So, okay, well, I'll study jazz, right? And I learned so much. I had some amazing teachers, but they kind of ruined music for me for a really long time. Like, I had a really hard time playing just to play. And I'm even going to go so far as to say that it wasn't until Thanksgiving of last year when I discovered TikTok that I finally got back to, I'm just doing this because I'm about to go crazy and I need to play some drums, and this is allowing me to, feel like I'm doing something different. Right? And and it was fun to be able to chase just whatever I wanted to play, because that was another thing that you kind of get into. And I mean, it's a little bit different with writing because I guess I could say that's true. I mean, sorry, I'm very tangential in my thinking all the time. But what I was going to say was, like, as a musician, when I was a career musician, I very rarely was I playing music that I was like, fuck yes, this is exactly what I want to be playing right now. I mean, in Knoxville, Tennessee, there was so much country that I had to play. And I hate country. I absolutely cannot stand country for the most part. That isn't to say that it's all bad, right? There's good in all genres, right? But it very rarely was I playing music that was close to my heart, right? Because we weren't playing originals, we were playing covers, because that's how you make money, right? And with writing, I would say that's even kind of true to a certain degree too, because for the most part, the original stuff that I've written, hopefully I'm moving into a new area like of my life, and this is with the Webtoon thing. This might be a little bit more true, but it's not been enough to support myself, right? I've always had to do something else, and a lot of times it was, maybe not even enough to really even justify the time to do it, right? Except for the fact that it was just bringing me joy on some level, right? I was, like I said, going crazy or whatever. I mean, you talked about needing to create or being happy that you're creating over the last year. I've always been, like I said, when I was playing and I was writing in the war journals and stuff like that, like I looking back on my life, I've kind of always been creative, and I don't think I really even realized it at the time. It was just like, that's just what it was fun. I was just having fun, right?
Yeah.
I was drawing pictures, and I was drawing pictures because I was reading comics, and that's a cool picture. I'm going to try to see if I can emulate that or whatever. And same thing with music. It's like, Dave Grohl, the badass, the drum part's awesome. I'm going to try to play that, and it's just kind of went from there, right? And it is really interesting how whenever you become dependent on something for your food, it does change it, and you make kind of weird choices based on that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one thing that I can't really say that this is my experience, but this is something that was passed on to me. Do you guys know who Jojo Mayer is? You ever heard of him?
I have, yeah.
Drummer. He's fantastic. He's with the band Nerve. He's amazing. If you don't know him, just check him out. It's awesome. He actually, when I was teaching at the drum store, he came and did a clinic, and I actually got to hang out with him pretty much all day, which was pretty awesome. But one of the things that he told me that I thought was awesome, it's really probably the one bit of advice that stuck with me more than anything else, was that he talked about how when he was in New York in the early days, he's like, I was just running myself ragged, taking every gig that I could get, just every gig that came my way, because I was afraid to turn down anything. Because if I turn this down, well, then they're never going to ask me again. Or, if I turn this gig down, then they're going to think I'm not hungry, and it's going to be a problem. And he said that one day a friend of his that he played in a couple of groups with before came up and was like, hey man, I got this new project and you'd be perfect for it. Sweet, sign me up. Let's do it. Yeah, I love playing with you. Let's do it. And he's like, okay, well, I need you to come meet me here at this date and this time for the audition. And he said, and he kind of stopped. And he was like, wait, I thought you just said I was perfect for this. Well, you are. Well, then why do I need to audition for it? Why don't I just show up and we just jam and we just play? Well, we got to, because of this, that, and the other. And he said it made him step back and think, do I really want to do that project? I mean, I like this guy, but no, I don't know that I want to do this now. And he said at that point, his perception changed, and it went from taking gigs that he felt he needed to take to only taking gigs that he wanted to take. And he said there was a 6-month period or so where it kind of like slowed down and everything got weird. And he kind of was like, oh shit, am I going to be able to eat? He said, but then it changed and the energy changed. And then the only gigs that were coming his way were gigs that he wanted to do. And that's me. It's like power of positive thinking. It's like, you're putting the energy out there and it comes back. And I've experienced that to a certain degree, just because I know that, from sinking a lot of time and energy into writing comics or, playing music, whatever, it's like you're investing your energy into this endeavor. And then eventually the universe starts kind of feeding you that energy back. Right. And it's like, I used to do the same kind of thing where I would take whatever gig would come my way. And I had a couple of friends that would always call me if they needed me to sub or whatever. And even after I said, I'm not doing this anymore, I got a corporate job, this is my thing. For like 3 years, I was still getting calls to do gigs, and it's like, because I'd been doing it for 10 years or whatever. And I had all this energy that had been put out into the world. At least that's the way I choose to look at it. Maybe I'm a hippie, I don't know. But it's the same thing with the comics. It started with me saying, I'm just going to do this. I don't care if it ever goes anywhere. I am just going to start making this happen. And I'm just going to do it because it's something that I've always wanted to do. And it's weird. It's so far, it's kind of, it's worked out more than I thought it was going to. I didn't think I was ever going to get what I would call a real gig doing it. I had 2 now, and it's pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, we can't wait to hear sort of how it goes when it all kicks off.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I'm so excited. We kind of started talking about it a little bit, and it's that story's going to be super cool because it's like I've always been equal parts sci-fi and fantasy, and a lot of the stuff that I write is always like it's like a blending of the two. And this story, the way that I'm looking at it is it's a like a medieval fantasy world, but at a point, it was like, I haven't actually sat down and wrote out, my talking points for it. And it's like, here's the log lines, but it's basically, it's set in a post-apocalyptic fantasy world. And it's almost like Mad Max meets Lord of the Rings, I guess is what I would say. Okay. And it's not Tolkien-esque really. No. It's more, there's no elves, right? Yeah. There's magic, but it's more like, I don't know, the society at the pre-cataclysm was basically like a Star Trek level utopia, but it wasn't run on tech, it was run on magic. Ooh, and cool. Then so that's where it's going. I don't want to talk too much more about it, but that's kind of where, and I'm like super excited about it because it's the art team that I'm working with is Cocoon. They're out of Indonesia, and they're so far all the character concepts and everything they've been coming up with has been awesome.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, where can if you want to drop in some tags and handles and
where to hit me up? Like the easiest place is TonyKarnowski.com. That's got a link to pretty much everything, all my social media and all that stuff on there too. Like all my different projects are linked there. The Pound and Sidonia Shattering when it comes out later this year, which we're looking. I don't have a definitive date, but we're looking probably around October is when that's probably going to start. Both of those are exclusively on Webtoons.com, which if you're not familiar with that platform, it's awesome. It's free.
Highly recommend it myself. I use it all the time. It's fantastic. Thank you very, very much for...
Tony, thank you so much. That was really entertaining.
It's such a vast and wonderful conversation.
Thanks, man. We get in some weird places, right? So, but no, this has been fantastic. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
I have been Nancy Art Music. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Nancy Art Music. Alex, where can we find you?
I'm Alex Roberts, and you can find me on Instagram at Alex Roberts Writer, and you can find my first collection of poetry, Empire, on Amazon.